Hi there, my name's Trent and I work here at Double H as the head of growth, and we're here to talk today about testing, tools and timing. Some of the kind of anticipate what your customers want by looking at, I guess, the content in some of the communications that we send out across the marketing cloud stack. I'm joined today by Pascal.
Hi everyone, my name is Pascal and I look after technology here at Double H Marketing. Super exciting topic for me. I'm always interested about how I can deliver better experiences for customers.
That's cool. I guess you've got a really long history in this regard, and I guess every day when we're working with customers, we really do have to dive into the details, not only of how the data works and how to execute that in a journey and how to test, whether or not people are going into those automations, but, we also look after the content itself. So what, I guess, jumping into it, what some of the things that you can do to kind of anticipate what the needs of your customers might be? And when you're talking to customers, how can we kind of be relevant without being too creepy?
That's a very good question. I want to cover that last little bit first. Relevant without being creepy. That's really interesting for me because it really depends on the individual as to what's going to work well and what's not going to work well. Personally speaking, I just love it when I turn up to a cafe and the barista goes, "Oh, hi Pascal, here's your oat flat white." I work with people here who would change coffee shops if that happened because they're like, "Oh, I've been pigeonholed. What if I want something else? That's not what I want." And so the way in which you deliver that information is really important. If you say something like, "Here's something specially picked for you," some people are not going to like that. Some people are. It's something you do actually have to test. And we'll talk a bit about testing further on that topic afterwards. But that's the first thing. The other part that's interesting to me is that a lot of people don't actually realize when they receive the communications what is personalized and what isn't. And that's where I find this stuff works really well. If I can show some products that are just interesting to me, I don't really care how they were selected. For all I know, everyone else in the database got the same message. But I don't care. That's a them problem, not a me problem. What I care about is, does that message speak to me? Similarly, if I get an email or a SMS or whatever, and every single bit of content on there is not interesting to me, then that's not interesting to me. That's no longer a creepiness thing. Where things get creepy is when someone tells you, "Oh, this is the best products for you to buy, chosen specifically for you," and then there's something weird in there because then you're like, "Hey, are you saying I'm weird? Like, why are you recommending toilet seats to me?" Right? It's not a good transaction from that. And there's a certain amount of, if you're going to tell me this is what you need, it better be something that's aspirational, not something that is, I'm desperate for. If I go in a message that's on a website, "Hi Trent, here is some specially picked toothbrushes for you," you're going to be like, "Whoa, that's creepy." However, if I happen to show some toothbrushes that are interesting, you might be like, "Well, maybe there's something in there for me, right?" But I'm not calling you out going, "Hey, you, check this out specifically." And that's where that changes. All right, so that's the creepy part. When it comes to having the relevant message, it's really about testing different things and understanding based on our segmentation what works well and what doesn't work well. People love talking about the segment of one. I hope we'll get there one day, but you still need some influence from the marketer at that stage because it's not just that we have a whole bunch of products and maybe they're appropriate for somebody. We really need to know, why is it that some customers are buying certain products? Because that actually impacts everything else. It's not just a promotions conversation. How are we going to promote this? It's what are the parts of the product that we want to push that is actually interesting to people. So for example, let's say you're dealing with home loans. There's a number of different features of a home loan that are going to be interesting to different people. For some people, it might be the low fees. For others, it might be the fact that, hey, we can bundle in a credit card. For others, it could be there's an offset account. Obviously, it depends on interest rates. For others, it's actually going to be the discount. For others, it's going to be how much money can you actually lend me based on my working situation. It's the same product, but there's actually effectively 4 or 5 different products within that. And so it's not just a question of just do whatever and see what one works. It's like, I want to understand what are the criteria that make somebody really care about some of these points. Because, for example, if people really care about how much money can you lend to me based on, maybe I'm self-employed, then actually the interest rate is nowhere near as important at that stage. And there's more variation on that. And there are other products that might be suitable for the person.
Yeah, it's definitely speaking across some of the things you covered. I can recall a couple of times receiving some, I guess, communications from, I guess, might be sort of personal hygiene products in some of my communications from supermarkets or chemists. It's can be a little strange sometimes, and there are stories of maybe something popping up in the family email from somebody going through something in the family. So yeah, funny stories about that. But ultimately, I guess across the range, it is kind of interesting in what you're touching on in regards to, there are certain features that resonate with certain segments in certain ways. So, when we look at this, what are the testing methods that you're using to nail down on those variables that fit those segments? How are we practically able to understand those with some of the tools we have?
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good question. So different people here have different opinions. Maybe you can share afterwards how you feel about that as well. But and very often people come to us and maybe they've used other platforms and they say things like, "Oh yeah, I want to do an A/B test on this." And I was going, "Great. This is one of my favorite things to do, right? Understanding what's actually going to deliver value." And then they turn around and they say, "So what we're going to do is we want to send to 5% of our audience choose two different subject lines and see what gets the better open rate." And it's like, that's interesting. And, the reality is that for some of the other platforms, that's the limit of what they can do. But when you're doing that, you're testing just one thing and you're really just testing for the open rate. Like no one's going to get that excited about open rates. What we really care about is the transaction that comes afterwards, whether it's signing up for an event or making a donation to a not-for-profit or actually purchasing a product or buying a subscription for something. Potentially the opposite, right? It might even be not canceling a subscription after being sent an email. The thing that we care about here is actually tying back a real conversion back into that. Personally speaking, the way I like to do that is with a tool like Journey Builder or Engagement Studio if you're using account engagement. The reason for that is that I want to do a split of my audience and then see how different audiences are going to react and then track it back all the way through to the conversion. So if I think the two subject lines are as good as each other, great. Let's do a 50-50 split and see if one works better than the other. Because, different audiences work differently. And whenever we start working with a customer, we have to understand what's actually going to work well for you. One of the things I actually really like about that is the Einstein sentiment analysis that you can do in Marketing Cloud. So they actually tell you, hey, your audience likes hopeful messages, your audience likes angry messages, their sense of urgency is important. Actually, a sense of urgency reduces conversions. That's really cool because it starts letting us adjust the tone based on what the audience expects. And then we can build on that. And that's something I want to learn. It's not something I want the machine to do for me because I need to understand what my brand is and I need to go from that rather than let the AI decide it for me based on who happened to do some activity at the start.
It's really, really important what you mentioned. I have to really maybe take a bit of a critical standpoint on this. I think that if you are, CMO or a head of marketing worth your salt, looking for a higher open rate and not coordinating with the rest of your business, you're doing a disservice to your marketing campaigns. I genuinely, I feel quite strongly about this sometimes that, if you're running a dashboard and patting each other on the back for a higher open rate, you're being left behind in the world of marketing because people really need to focus on what the business outcome is, whether or not they're moving the needle for the business, not whether or not it's a metric like open rate, which meanwhile by itself, we could probably have a very long conversation about how unreliable open rate has become in recent times. Yeah, it is really important that I often do reaffirm with a lot of customers I'm working with that, it is great to have a click through and things like that, but it doesn't always indicate whether or not that you're actually going to lead to a conversion or whether or not it's going to produce revenue down the line. There was a really funny example one time of an organization that I worked with who, just before I'd met them, they'd ran a competition to drive engagement and to drive sign-ups to I think they were a financial services company, and they gave away a car and they produced thousands of leads. But famously, not a single one of them converted because they were all there to win a car, not to sign up to their services. So yeah, when it comes to, I guess, your content being specific and making sure it's relevant, but measuring it in the right way can make a huge difference to you defining successful content, right?
That's right. Where can I get a car, by the way?
Yeah. It's definitely was an easy win for that customer. But look, as we go a little bit more practically into it, speaking more specifically about Salesforce and Salesforce's suite of tools, what do we have there to help us with this?
Cool. So for me, the main ones are Journey Builder right now. It's my go-to for doing these sorts of tests and then doing some splits. Does it make a difference? For example, if we use send time optimization, use the AI to recommend the best sending time. Sometimes it makes a huge difference, right? And sometimes it doesn't. I think it's a great example because we're working with a customer once that had something that came up that was really interesting, which was that there was a whole bunch of customers who would open the emails before 7 a.m. And that's a little bit unusual. Why were they opening the emails so early? But actually, there are some jobs where that's just what happens, right? If you are targeting, if one of the segments you're targeting is tradies are not going to be reading their emails during the day. They're on tools. They're outside, right? They read the email when they're having a coffee break, or getting breakfast in the morning. So it's a different type of engagement there. There's something different going on here. What is it? And what does it mean to me? And then you can start digging and go, what do these people have in common? Because then you can also adjust your product. You can adjust your content. You can start doing some splits. And then going forward, it might be like, hey, if we're going to send an email about this, or if we're going to send an SMS about this, it needs to be different for that group over there versus that group over there. And once you start doing the splits, you can tell, is it worth my while? If you get a huge increase in transactions, it's like, great, it's worth my time. If you get an increase in transaction that is measurable, but actually it doesn't result too much in a monetary sense or in an organizational goal, it can be like, well, that was interesting, but it's not enough to make a difference for us. Maybe we will let AI do a bit of adjustments on that, let Einstein do his thing, but we're going to spend our time somewhere else where there's other theories that we want to test to see, do they make a difference or not? And do they lead to better conversions?
Yeah, it's look, there's such a world that is kind of untapped now where we can have AI spin up some content and spin up some various images even these days and stuff like that. So yeah, it's getting to an exciting time where tailoring the right content for the right audience is becoming ever easier and quicker, but ultimately, making sure that we can identify the segments and communicate to them how that they like to be communicated and when is really leading that change. No, that's awesome. So thank you so much for giving us a bit of a practical run through of your process and some of the things that you're looking at and seeing. It's there's so many stories that we can share here that we probably can't share in this amount of time. But if you are interested in hearing some of those stories or are interested in hearing some of our feedback in terms of how we could maybe help you do things better, please feel free to reach out to us at info@hmarketing.com.au. It's been really enjoyable this time around. I like the amount of knowledge you bring in this topic, Pass. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.